I think that what these other nations are talking about is a more stable currency that they can be part of because, some of these countries have just been hammered holding dollars. I mean, when you look at the conversion right now, the dollar and the yen, it's like, 96, 98 yen to a dollar, where it used to be 130, 140. That affects their exports. Same thing with the euro. It was up to 156. It was $1.56 per euro. Now it's down about 1.28. So there's a lot of fluctuation, and this affects businesses throughout the world in terms of their exports and imports and also our economy. So basically what they're trying to do here is looking for more currency stability, which will lead to more economic stability. And a lot of people don't realize this right now is, yes, we're going through a challenging time economically in our country, but most nations of the world are in much worse shape than us. And we have caught the Hong Kong flu, and the world is catching the pneumonia.
Yeah.
And we are being blamed for it, rightly so, and they're looking for more fiscal and financial security, and they believe a move to a eventual one world currency, which is very biblical, is going to be the solution.
Yeah. Well, I think the question is, would there be an intermediary, first come another one world currency, and then the leap to cashless society? We don't know that, but I mean, that's interesting to speculate upon.
Yeah, and I think that's what's going to happen, Jen. It won't jump. I mean, we have less major currencies now. We used to have a lot more currencies in Europe. But now we have the euro that's predominant, and the British pound, and then we have the yen, and then we have the dollar. I mean, those are really pretty much the four major currencies of the world. And obviously other countries have their own currencies, but as far as big, strong, dominant currencies, you could see it go from 4 to maybe 2, and eventually 1. Something of that nature. And with the practices of the central banks around the world that are pumping out a lot of money in order to stabilize their economies, like the UK, like the United States, and other countries are considering the same thing, it's going to create monetary instability. And again, it will lead to eventually a couple currencies and eventually to one currency.
Now, as David Limbaugh has written in a number of articles, it seems to me that the administration has, and he states it very well, a war on the American dream. And Limbaugh says that the president has bought class warfare to levels that would make Marxists blush. Now, I'm a little concerned because I heard a clip. I actually was watching Hal Lindsey's program a week ago. And folks, if you don't agree with his eschatology, we happen to, but just set that aside because the clip I want to play has nothing to do with eschatology. It has everything to do with what's happening in our country right now as it concerns, management by crisis is what Hal calls it. And just to summarize, basically, Hal says that this management by crisis is you create a problem or a conflict and exaggerate it. You publicize and create opposition to it. You offer a solution, simple the better. It doesn't have to be logical. Appeal to the emotions and make the public believe something is being done for them. And he brings out that this is from George Hegel. And then students of Karl Marx call it, they followed up and called it the management by crisis, which actually is the centerpiece of communism. And let me just play, it's about 4 minutes here, and let you hear what he has to say.
Broken down into its component steps, here's how Hegel's principle works. Step 1, create a problem or conflict. Practitioners will either identify a potential problem or create one out of thin air, then exaggerate it beyond its actual importance. While nobody doubts that the economy is in trouble, on Election Day, the Dow Jones was still above 9,000. Since then, even former President Bill Clinton has called on President Obama to stop talking down the economy. Step 2, publicize the problem and create opposition to it. The left in America has a tailor-made apparatus for publicizing the problem and creating opposition among the population, the mainstream media. By constantly covering the problem from the administration's desired slant, the media makes the conflict a foregone conclusion. Eventually, the public begins to clamor for a solution to this problem. The steady drumbeat from the White House is, we inherited this problem from the high-spending, low-tax Bush administration. The only way to fix it is to increase spending tenfold and raise taxes. In reality, the stimulus bill stimulates nothing but more government spending. It's not stimulating the economy. President Obama has proposed spending more money in the first 6 weeks of his term than President Bush spent on the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the general war on terror, and Hurricane Katrina over a period of 7 years. According to the Office of Management and Budget, the Bush deficit for 2008 was a comparatively paltry $410 billion. The current administration is now projecting an annual deficit well over $1 trillion in the near future. Obama has committed to more deficit spending than any nation in the history of the world. Over the next 3 years, the government will need to borrow $3.6 trillion. But very few dare to question or oppose anything because of the crisis. Step 3, offer a solution. Of course, in today's America, with its soundbite mentality, the simpler the solution, the better. And there's no need for it to be logical. The best ones are those that appeal to the emotions and make the public feel that something really good is being done for them, when in reality, something really bad is being done to them, especially when it's a solution no one knew we needed before the conditioning process of the step 2. And when you're talking numbers like these, no one can actually comprehend their magnitude. It's like we've entered a surreal world. Solving the current crisis would rob the administration of its greatest asset. The Democrats have been pushing universal health care since 1993, but it has always been wisely rejected because it would be too expensive. Further, as much as we want it to be, government-controlled universal health care doesn't work. Just ask the British or the Canadians. But thanks to the media-magnified worst economic crisis since the 1930s, universal health care was sneaked into the stimulus bill without even a debate. Our current hyped-up crisis has also allowed billions for environmental spending, billions more for trade unions, cap-and-trade schemes, and the list goes on ad nauseum. Most of these long-term favorite liberal projects have nothing to do with stimulating the economy. It's self-serving pork by any other name. 20 years ago, no politician in America would dare to confess the use of Hegelian tactics to manipulate public opinion. They'd employ them without hesitation, but they would never admit it. But last week in Brussels, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton echoed Rahm Emanuel. She told the European Parliament,
never waste a good crisis. And when it comes to the economic crisis, don't waste it when it can have a very positive impact on climate change and energy security. And that's what we're trying to do.
Hegel couldn't have said it better. To Obama's cabinet, a financial crisis is not for solving. It's for manipulating to achieve a desired goal. So the average guy gets hurt a little. He'll get over it. After all, the proletariat feels it must be for its own good.
Bill, I'm going to have you respond to that on the other side of a break that I have to take. You were able to hear that, weren't you?
It was brilliant.
Yeah, I want your take on that when we come back. I've got to take a free market capitalistic break here after all that. I'm sorry, but